Nicholas Hill was kicked over 24 times. Kicks to the head and neck area that left him brain dead in March. His death ruled a homicide by the coroner.
News alert tonight. These two inmates now suspects after another prisoner is found dead at Sterling Correctional Facility. Now, this is raising questions about the safety of the guards and the employees
Corrections
there.
is trying to get to the bottom of a inside a prison. Somebody, 25-year-old George McLean last night. He was serving 13 years for robbery.
Colorado's state prisons have been running hot. In 2025, the Department of Corrections activated emergency prison population management measures after statewide vacancy fell below 3%, a red line signal that beds were essentially full. Recent legislation that cut hundreds of beds while reopening only a fraction pushed more people into already stressed facilities and overflowed local jails. At the same time, CDOC has struggled to staff posts. Officer vacancies have hovered above 20%, and nearly a quarter of the workforce is nearing retirement. Advocates and auditors link that staffing crisis to more frequent lockdowns, thinner supervision, and an uptick in assaults. The numbers reflected. In 2014, Colorado logged 109 non-serious assaults on staff. By 2018, that figure more than doubled to 251. Inmate-on-inmate violence also climbed over the same period, from 364 incidents without serious injury and 594 with injury to 589 and 932, respectively. This report focuses only on Colorado Department of Corrections facilities, not federal prisons like EDX Florence, and examines the state's most dangerous yards tracking gangs, riots, stabbings, escapes, and lethal attacks that define their reputations.
An inmate has died after a violent brawl at the Colorado State Penitentiary in Canyon City. Thomas LaPerche was serving a life sentence for...
Opened in 1993, CSP is Colorado's Level 5 supermax, built to confine the state's most violent and disruptive prisoners in 23-hour-a-day isolation. The complex sits within the larger Canyon City prison hub, whose lineage reaches back to the original 1871 penitentiary site of a notorious 1929 riot that left 8 officers and 2 inmates dead. Despite CSP's fortress-style controls, violence persists. One incarcerated writer has called it the state's most violent prison, describing a scene where 4 men viciously stabbed another just feet from his cell. Officers' pepperball rounds couldn't save the victim.
Danny Cochran's son Nicholas Hill was kicked over 24 times. Kicks to the head and neck area that left him brain dead in March. His death ruled a homicide by the coroner. Investigators with the Colorado Department of Corrections say these 3 men, Terrell Lee, Charles Porter, and Justin Sanders, allegedly assaulted Hill and multiple other inmates. All 3 men are now facing second-degree charges in Fremont County. The fight all started with multiple inmates having alcohol in prison.
In 2023, surveillance footage in the 3-day room captured a brutal beating of Nicholas Hill knocked to the ground, then stomped while unconscious. He was airlifted out and died 4 days later. CSP is one of only 2 Level 5 facilities in Colorado alongside Centennial South, and nearly everyone there lives under supermax restrictions. Even high-profile prisoners haven't been immune to the environment's dangers.
The theater shooter has been moved to the Colorado State Penitentiary near Canyon City.
This is just a temporary move. The state is working to find him a permanent place to spend his life sentence. But we do know that he is currently in a transitional housing building and he does not have any contact with any other prisoners. Holmes is not in a maximum security status holding, but he is being held in a temporary single cell. A spokesperson with the DOC tells us he is being classified as a close custody offender.
After the Aurora theater shooter James Holmes was attacked by another inmate in 2015, officials moved him out of CSP. The takeaway is stark. CSP's design isolates gang leaders and limits movement, but it hasn't eliminated inmate-on-inmate violence, contraband, grudges, and opportunistic attacks continue to break through the walls they intended
The
order.
tear gas overwhelming. A guard at the Sterling prison accused of filling a room with pepper spray before 3 Muslim inmates went in to pray. And it's their religion at the center of this lawsuit. Guard allegedly laughing, then threatening retaliation. One prisoner claimed the pepper spray triggered an asthma attack.
In northeastern Colorado, Sterling Correctional Facility is a level 4 close security prison and the state's largest lockup. Built to hold roughly 2,500 men, about a tenth of the entire CDOC population. Its size and inmate mix have made it one of Colorado's most volatile yards. Between 2010 and 2013, 4 prisoners met their demise at Sterling.
These are the Department of Corrections photos of Robert Sproul's and Thomas Johns. Both inmates at the Sterling Correctional Facility have been removed from general population and segregated following the death of this inmate, Cody Gray, who was serving a life sentence for sexual assault, drugs, and burglary. All 3 inmates were known as close custody offenders. The 2 suspects, Sproul's and Johns, are prison gang members. Sproul's is serving 48 years for attempted in Arapahoe County. Johns is already in prison for life, convicted of an employee at this Arvada Burger King in 2007. Marshals.
By some counts, Cody Gray's 2014 demise was the 6th since 2010. Victims are often sex offenders or men with notorious crimes who become targets. In one widely cited case, lifer Lyle Brent White warned he was being threatened and begged to be moved. He was beaten to death with a hammer in December 2011. Staff are not spared. In November 2018, a dining hall brawl sent 4 correctional officers to the hospital with serious injuries after multiple inmates rushed the serving line. Even officials acknowledge the reality. With more than 2,500 people packed into a single complex, violent confrontations happen. Active prison gang networks, including White-supremacist and Sureños sets, regularly drive stabbings, ambushes, and retaliatory beatings. What keeps Sterling dangerous is the combination: a massive population, persistent staffing shortages, and the flow of contraband that thrives when supervision is thin. The perimeter bristles with razor wire and towers, but inside, the daily risk both inmate-on-inmate and inmate-on-staff remains a defining feature of life at SCF.
And developing this afternoon, a Department of Corrections employee is recovering after being attacked by an inmate last night at an eastern Colorado prison. That prison is still on lockdown as of this afternoon. Now, because of the investigation, we're told there will be no visitation this weekend as they work through all the evidence.
Corrections is trying to get to the bottom of a homicide inside a prison. Somebody killed 25-year-old George McClain last night. He was serving 13 years for robbery.
Set on the high plains of eastern Colorado, Limon Correctional Facility is a level 4 men's prison built for roughly 1,000 inmates. It routinely houses some of the state's most dangerous prisoners, and its timeline reads like a ledger of near-fatal close calls and deadly attacks.
The case involves a prison inmate named Edward Montour, who is accused of beating a prison guard named Eric Autoby to death in 2002. Montour pled guilty to the and was convicted, but the state Supreme Court threw out his death sentence in 2007 because it was imposed by a judge and not a jury, as is required. Now the case is back in court. This time the killer is pleading not guilty by reason of insanity, and the victim's father, who wanted to seek the ultimate punishment in the original trial, has had a change of heart.
The worst day for staff came in October 2002, when Officer Eric Autoby was beaten to death in the kitchen by inmate Edward Montour Jr. 2 years later. On March 28, 2004, prisoner Jeffrey Aird was stabbed repeatedly in a housing unit and died of his wounds. In 2007, Officer Pam Kahanick survived a throat slashing with a box cutter. She returned to duty just weeks later, a testament to both grit and the ever-present risk on the T's. More recently, the 2015 death of Joshua Edwards, initially treated as a medical issue, was reclassified as a homicide after an autopsy found he'd been stabbed in the neck and strangled. Simon's roster has included high-profile criminals, among them Freddie Glenn, convicted in the demise of Kelsey Grammer's sister, and serial robber Charles Brown. And the steady presence of gang-affiliated inmates keeps tensions sharp. Like other Colorado prisons, LCF has been strained by chronic staffing shortages and housing pressures. Fewer officers on the floor mean more lockdowns, thinner supervision, and slower responses, conditions that allow contraband to circulate and grudges to harden. The result is a yard where assaults on both staff and inmates aren't outliers, but recurring stress fractures in an already volatile environment. Sitting beside CSP in the East Cannon complex, Centennial is split into two distinct units. Centennial South opened 2011, a Level 5 administrative segregation prison where prisoners live in near total isolation, and Centennial North, a Level 4 maximum unit. The population here is the definition of high-risk men whose histories of violence or disruption make them unsafe in general population. Because movement is so restricted, major incidents surface less often, but the roster tells the story. Inmates like Devin Erickson, one of the STEM School Highlands Ranch shooters, and Christopher Scarver, who unalived Jeffrey Dahmer while incarcerated, have been held here under tight controls. Centennial, like CSP, exists to contain people who remain dangerous. Its design limits the chaos, but it doesn't change the fact that it's where Colorado locks away those most likely to harm others if given the chance. Colorado's prison system reflects a dangerous tension. Facilities built to contain violent men are themselves breeding grounds for violence when crowding, understaffing, and contraband intersect. CSP in Cannon City shows that even in near total isolation, brutality persists. Contraband and grudges find ways to erupt into deadly assaults. Sterling, the state's largest lockup, highlights how scale and gang presence magnify risks, turning the prison into a flashpoint for both inmate and staff attacks. Limon demonstrates how a medium-sized but high-risk yard can carry a long history of deadly incidents, from staff deletions to inmate homicides. Centennial, designed as CSP's counterpart, reminds us that extreme isolation may reduce daily flare-ups, but is also where Colorado places its most notorious and volatile prisoners. Together, these prisons form the backbone of Colorado's maximum security network. Each has its own character: Sterling's crowded chaos, Limon's deadly flashpoints, CSP's volatile isolation, and Centennial's cage for the highest risk, but all share the same underlying crisis: too many inmates, not enough staff, and a culture of violence that refuses to stay locked down. Colorado's correctional system isn't just managing populations. It's constantly balancing on the edge of eruption, where a single spark, an insult, a gang rivalry, or a shift running short staff can turn into bloodshed. These prisons aren't just dangerous for those inside. They reflect the systemic pressures and policy choices shaping safety, justice, and control across the state.